Hi everyone and welcome back to the Crafty Yellow Camper. I've got some more Christmas cards to show you today, so let's get going. I'm going to be using the Fragrant Forest stamp set, which is one large background stamp. So I'll move the stamp set case out of the way and then you can see it. You need to mount this up on a large block. The Stampin' Up! Largest block that we sell fits this. I just grabbed one that was to hand because my Stampin' Up! Ones are put away in the case at the minute. So you just need to literally mount it. This is the card we're going to make, sorry. Hopefully you can see that. It's got some copper embossing on it. Okay, so I'm going to bring in some Mossy Meadow ink and I'm just going to ink it up. Now we're going to stamp a matte layer with this, so it isn't going to go right to the edge, but just to be on the safe side. And I've just realised the stamp is actually upside down, which doesn't matter because it's on a matte layer, but if you are going to be putting it on a card, try and get it the right way up. So I'm just bringing in a piece of basic white. My card base for this is half of an A4 sheet, so cut lengthways, so it's lengthways, it's a 10-fold card, so that's cut at 10.5 by the full length of an A4 sheet and scored at 14.8. This is the matte layer that I'm going to stamp on, but we are going to cut this down, so at the minute this is just quarter of a basic white A4 sheet. Okay, and I'm just going to lay my piece of cardstock on to the stamp. Now I found the easiest way to do this is to put a piece of scrap paper over the top and then give it a good push down. My hands aren't big enough to hold one of these large blocks. If you've got bigger hands then you might find it comfortable, but my hands actually don't and I end up dropping it. Okay, so we're just going to give that a good smooth over, and then when we lift that up, you can see that's turned the right way around. We've got our nice clear image. Okay, just going to get rid of my piece of scrap. I'm just going to bring my chamois in and give that a clean, because I don't want to get green ink everywhere. I'm sorry if that noise is a bit like fingernails down a chalkboard for some people. You do need to make sure, because this is quite a detailed stamp, you do need to make sure you get right in around the stamp to get rid of the colour. There we go. Right, so that's all nice and clean, and I've probably now got a nice green hand. Okay, right, so we can dispose of this. Now my other piece of advice to you, these are cling mount stamps, so I would not leave it on your block for any length of time because it will weld itself down and you'll have trouble getting it off. If that happens, so say for example I'd been called away from my desk and I'd forgotten that I'd left this on the block and came back the next day, if that happens, don't dig your fingernails into the edges, because you will end up pulling the sponge that is underneath the red rubber away. The best thing to do is sort of roll your finger underneath it and it will come away quite easily. Okay, let's put that back in the case. Okay, get rid of that big block. Okay, just going to close my ink up because I know I end up getting in a mess. Now this is a really simple card. So what I've done, I've got a Mossy Meadow background, as I said. So let me just grab that out. And then I've got a layer of Wild Wheat, which is one of the in colours. Although this is called Wild Wheat, it's almost a gold colour. It's actually really quite nice on Christmas cards. I hadn't really used it that much, and then I thought, oh, that would be quite nice. And yeah, it really is. It looks a little bit more luminous on the camera to me than it actually does in real life. It's quite a nice goldy colour. Okay, so we've got that matte layer, and that is cut at 10 centimetres by 14.3. And then what I'm going to do is bring in my trimmer and we're going to trim this down. So you'll have noticed that there's a very thin white line top and bottom where the edge of the stamp is, but that's fine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to trim just a small bit off the top, which gets rid of that white line for us, and then I'm going to measure it. Now we want this at 13.8, and that will nicely take that bottom white line off for us. So it's literally just taken those shavings off, and then we want to cut it down to 9.5 across. So just check and see if there's any bits that you're not happy with, and that edge there is not great on mine, so I'm going to literally just take off that edge. Okay, let's move my trimmer, and then we can start layering up. So the first thing we're going to do is stick our stamped panel to our piece of wild wheat, and I'm using Tombow for this because it gives me a little bit of wiggle room. Just remember not to put too much on. I've gone over the side of the card there. Okay, and we're going to stick that onto our wild wheat panel just with a small border around the edge, and then we're going to stick that one onto our card base. Now if you want to add ribbon or anything like that, this is the point to do it before you stick it onto your card base. Okay, but I'm not going to put ribbon on mine. Okay, and you'll notice I've opened up my card base to stop it bouncing around so I can get it level. Okay, so that's that on there. And then what I've done for the greeting, I've used the deckled circles dies. I really love these dies. I often wonder how I manage without them. I've got the deckled circles dies, and what I've done is I've cut a larger one in wild wheat. If I grab the dies out, I think I've used number 4 and 5 going up from the middle. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 going up from the middle. So used the number 5 going up from the smallest for the wild wheat, and then I've cut another circle from copper clay, which is another in colour, and that's the next one down. So I'm just going to pop those dies away so I don't lose them. I don't know where they are. Now you might have noticed I've cut myself 2 of the copper clay circles, and that's because I'm going to stamp onto these on camera. Now I only need 1, but you can bet your bottom dollar that if I only cut 1, I'll mess the first stamp up. So what we're going to do, I'm going to bring in some copper embossing powder. So I'm using my little embossing buddy just to give that a little rub over, and then I'll bring in my embossing powder. McFlurry spoons are very good for spooning out embossing powder, and I quite often use a takeaway tub. And we are going to use a sentiment out of Regal Reindeer, and this is the Regal Reindeer set. Now this was in the Christmas or autumn winter seasonal last year, and it's actually gone over into the annual catalogue, and we've got wishing you a wonderful season filled with all the good things that warm your heart and lift your spirit. I just really think that's a nice sentiment. These are red rubber, so we just need a block to mount that on. And then I'm going to grab my Versamark ink. So Versamark ink is a sticky ink. It's clear. When you get your pads, they're lovely and white. Mine's very well used. And you can actually buy a re-inker. We sell the Versamark re-inker, which is always a good investment if you do a lot of heat embossing. Now, I'm going to try and get this level without getting my head in the camera. Okay, I think about there will do it. Try not to wiggle the sentiment. Okay, so you probably won't be able to see that on the camera. I try picking it up, you might be able to see it. Okay. Yeah, there you go. Can you see the tacky ink is giving us sort of a watermark effect? And then what we're going to do, we're going to emboss that with some copper. Now, ordinarily, I would do this on a bigger piece and then cut it out for the purposes of the video. So if you just hold on to it with some tweezers, you can flick off any extra, and you can see I've just caught the edge of the stamp there. So I was obviously a little bit heavy with it. So I'm just bringing in a clean paintbrush just to flick off the excess. And I always put my embossing powder back into the tub. And screw the lid on before I start heating. So that way I don't knock it over and make a big mess. Okay, let's pop those back in there. And mine are stored, as I said, in takeaway tubs. Lock and lock boxes work equally as well. Then what we need to do is bring the heat gun in. Now I'm going to heat this up a little bit under the table. Hopefully you can still hear me talking while it's just warming up a little bit. If you start with it already warm, it will melt the powder much quicker. And what we're looking for is for that, can you see that? That's quite dull. We're looking for that to turn into a nice coppery colour, and then we'll know that we've heated it all. And you want to make sure not to overheat it, otherwise it will go really dull. Okay, so there we go. So there's our copper sentiment. Now, if you are doing this on a bigger piece of paper and you are then going to die cut it, always make sure the embossing powder has cooled down, because if you try and do it while it's still warm, you will smudge it. Okay, so that's our greeting. We'll just give that a few seconds to cool down. I'm just going to pop my stamp back. I try and make a point of putting the stamps back in the cases so that I don't lose them, because they do like to attach themselves to jumper sleeves and cardigans and such like. Okay, so we've got our sentiment and we've got our piece of backing card. That's the spare one. I'll keep that for later. And then what I'm going to do is we are also going to add a piece of basic white to the inside of the card, because obviously it's quite dark green. Now, if you're going to stamp anything on this, you need to do it before you stick it in. So that way, if you mess it up, you can turn it over. Okay, and I'm going back to my Regal Reindeer again for this. And we've got these really nice trees. So I'm just going to grab a block to mount those on. We've already got a greeting on the front of the card. There is Merry Christmas that I might put into the well, I am going to put onto the inside of the card, but I just wanted to do this first. So I'm just going to get those trees stamped in there. And then what I'm going to do is grab another block and we'll have the Merry Christmas greeting. Somebody obviously used that in my class yesterday and didn't clean it before they put it away, but that's fine. We're using the same colour and we're just going to stamp that in the middle. And that's why I wanted to stamp the trees first, so I could see how far up that went. Okay, so we can lose our Mossy Meadow ink. We'll just give these stamps a clean. As I said, it is a good idea to clean up as you go along. If you're going to stamp using the same stamp several times, then it's okay to do it a couple of times, but I would clean it up in between. If I was going to stamp this sentiment 10 times, I wouldn't stamp it 10 times without cleaning it, because what would happen is you'd end up with a build-up of ink and you'll end up with some nasty shadowing around the edge of your stamp when you stamp it. Okay, so I'm just going to pop those away. Okay, and that is going to go into the inside of our card. So I'm just going to pop a bit of Tombow on the back of that. And you don't need to use tons of the Tombow. Let's just check we've got the card the right way up. Yes. Okay. So that's going to go in there, which is going to give us our panel for writing on. So by now this is nice and dry. So I'm just going to grab some dimensionals. Now these are the large dimensionals and I've actually used all of the hexagons. So we're now using the edges. Never throw away the edges of your dimensionals. They are just as useful. Now I'm going to put, I don't normally put loads on the back, but you will see why I have in a minute. So we're going to stick our copper clay embossed layer to the wild wheat. I'm just using a little bit of Tombow on the copper clay, and I've got dimensionals on the back of the wild wheat, and we're just going to eyeball that to get that in the middle. And this is why I'm using Tombow, because it does give us a little bit of wiggle room. Okay, that's that. Give that a press down. Okay, now I'm going to put some this is a retired product. You could use ribbon or you could use twine, but I suddenly remembered I've got this copper thread, I suppose you'd call it. It came in a pack of gold, silver and copper, and I haven't really used it very much, and when I was tidying up the other day I found it. So yeah, there it is. So I'm just gonna do, but as I said, this is a retired product, so if you haven't got this you could use twine. I'm just going to wind it around my hand a few times and then snip it off. Okay, let's just pop that out of the way. And then what I'm going to do is take off the backings on my dimensionals. I'm going to attach this behind our greeting so that it sort of peeks out. So I just want to make sure I've got the greeting the right way up. This is going to stick to the dimensionals before we stick it down. So that's our greeting the right way up. And I want it to just sort of poke out the side and underneath. Hopefully you can see that. And as I said, this technique works exactly the same with twine. And we're going to pop that on there, making sure that we get our greeting straight. Now, I think it's quite nice like that, but I just wanted to add another little something to it. So I've gone ahead and I've embossed the reindeer in copper embossing powder on some basic white. I'm just going to pop some dimensionals behind him, and this is where these side dimensionals come in really handy, because they're basically half of a dimensional, which is handy when you don't need a full one. Let's take the back ends off that, and we're just going to pop him down here so he looks like he's grazing in the trees. There we go, and there's our finished card with our regal reindeer on it. Hope you like it, and I hope you'll have a go at making the card. There's our original one. There's the one I've just made with you, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks for watching, and happy stamping. Bye for now.